Web page building blocks. HTML is comprised of elements, attributes, and values. In this particular example, we see an image element, and I'm going to, throughout this course, use the word element and tag synonymously. I will use one or the other or both. They are the same thing, element and tag. And in this case, I have an image element. It is IMG. It stands for an image. And I have what's called an attribute value pair to the right of it. So when you insert an image into a page, for example, you have to tell the HTML code where to find the image and things like its height and width. And here we have an attribute value pair. The attribute is source, src, equals family.jpg. Alright, the value in an attribute value pair is always enclosed in quotes. And you can have more than one attribute value pair for each element. So like I said, an image needs to know where the source image is, and it also needs to know the width so that it can display it in the correct height and width in the page. So we have a width here equals 200 pixels, and again the value for the width attribute is enclosed in quotation marks. We have this concept in HTML of block versus inline tags, and block level tags are always displayed on a new line. For example, if you have a paragraph tag or a header tag, the paragraph of text is going to have a blank line before it and a blank line after it. There's just not a whole lot we can do about that at this point. It's just the way that the browser will display it, and that's because the paragraph tag is a block level tag. So is the header tag. Think of a header. There's an H1 through H6 tags, and a header 1 is very large. Think of it as being like the words "The Dallas Morning News" on the Dallas Morning News paper. That would be an example of a header 1. Okay, so those are block level tags, and they have a line before and after them, and there's just a block. Think of everything that you see in HTML as being a block or a box, because there is a block or a box around every element in HTML. Now, inline tags are a little bit different. These are the types of tags that cause changes within the current line of code or text, if you will. So inside of a paragraph, we might have an emphasis or a strong tag. EM is for emphasis, strong. Emphasis is like italicizing, and strong is like bolding. And these tags would not introduce a new line or a blank line of text above or below them. They would just be something that would affect the text in line in the current paragraph, for example, and these are inline tags. In HTML, you have the concepts of parent and children, and you need to understand that all of the HTML pages that we're going to be building are hierarchical. For example, here's a paragraph, and inside of the paragraph we have the quick brown fox ... and inside of that paragraph you have this emphasis tag here. This emphasis tag, and what that's doing, it starts here and it ends right here. It's wrapped around the word brown, and so what it's doing is it's emphasizing the word brown and changing it to look italic or to appear italicized. Alright, this is called tag nesting, is one way to put it, and it shows that HTML really has an hierarchical structure to it. And you could also demonstrate that concept with this diagram here, where you can see that under the P tag or inside of it you have something emphasized. Okay, another way that we could say this is the M tag is the child of the P tag. Said another way, the P tag is the parent of the emphasis tag. Okay, so there are several different ways that you can look at those relationships, but it really is all the same. It's parents and children for now. Now, web pages in an HTML document, any thing that you, any extra spaces that you inject into the source code, those are considered white space and they're ignored by the browser. Any extra returns or any times that you hit the space bar 5 times because you're trying to tab something over or make it appear like it's tabbed or indented from the left, those are white spaces. Those will be ignored by the browser, which is actually kind of good, because what that will do for us is allow us to create several returns or spaces to format our code in such a way that it's human readable, but those spaces and returns will be ignored. And you also have this idea of special characters, and these are called entities. You don't see that on the slide here, but they're called entities. And an example of an entity is something that you can't just type, for example, a copyright out on your HTML page. So what you have to do is use this character code. Basically, it's the same kind of concept that you have in a Word document, where if you wanted to do a copyright, you might press the Alt key and then a 4-digit code. You know, for example, 3262 might get you a copyright. I don't know what it actually is. Well, in here, same kind of concept in HTML. You have to enter an ampersand copy and then semicolon to get a copyright symbol to appear in your HTML page. And here are some other ones. And amp colon semicolon would do an ampersand. Here's a trademark and a less than and greater than sign. That's right. Even though those are on the keyboard in HTML world, they they're considered entities, and there's a character code that you have to use to display them. This slide, I just wanted to kind of get you to have a little bit of reality on something. In this class, we're going to work with a very large number of files. For example, in this MSNBC page, you might have the HTML file that you're looking at, but inside of it, you have a styles.css file. It's called the style sheet file. It's nothing more than a text file that includes formatting information about the page. Okay. Additionally, you might have javascript.js. You might have a JavaScript file, an external JavaScript file that contains information about how to create the menus in the navigation on the left. You may have several images in your page, such as the image of Bush, the MSNBC logo, the MSN logo at the top right. You may have Flash files that would have an SWF or an FLA extension on them. And an example of that might be this TurboTax advertisement that you see in the right column in the middle. And then additionally, you might be linked to movies, or you might embed movies within your page. So again, all you're doing is referring to an external resource. And in this case on MSNBC, there's a video link to a movie that will open up in a movie player. So the idea here is that in HTML, it's not just HTML files or just HTML that you have to learn. There's a whole host of technologies, and there are a large number of files that you have to work with. So the reason I mention that, you need to get used to the idea of creating a naming convention for yourself that you follow fairly consistently, and you need to be very comfortable navigating large numbers of files and saving and finding large numbers of files that you need to work with, and having a good method of organization for files and folders on your computer. These are URL schemes. What they are briefly is just a way to get to some resource. For example, http:// accesses a web page, as we know. FTP:// could allow you to access an FTP server. That's just a remote server where you can put files somewhere. We're going to be doing that in this class. Later on in this class, we're going to create a type of hyperlink with this URL scheme, where we do a mail_to: and then we provide someone's email address, and it will open up, for example, Outlook when it's clicked. Whatever mail package they have, the user that's clicking on it has installed on their machine. And then a file : / would access just a local file on the person's machine who's clicking that URL in the web page. Now, there are two types of URLs: absolute URLs And then I'm going to go on to the next slide and show you that there are relative URLs. Relative URLs can be broken down into two different types. So let's go back. Absolute URL. This is a path that can be followed from any internet connected machine in the world. So unless you're in China and you're blocked, you should be able to get to this address. http://www.yahoo.com/images/family.jpg. Everybody should be able to get there. That's called an absolute URL. It begins with the URL scheme. And in this case, we have something called a relative URL. And we have two types, document relative URLs and site relative URLs. And I find that it's easiest to explain site root relative URLs. Site root relative URLs, it's like you're going to be putting files up to a server on the web. And when you want to tell somebody or create a path within your document to get to a particular file on your web server, it's real easy to say, hey, let's just start at the very top. Let's start at the site root, the top level folder, and let's build a path all the way down. And that's what you'll do. And you'll always notice that those begin with a /. So anytime you see a /, such as in this case here, you'll know that you're looking at a site root relative URL. And then the other type is a document relative, and it can just be a path from where you are pointing to another file, or you could, as in the case here, go ... and go up a folder and then have a path to another file somewhere on your server. Alright, so these won't make a lot of sense until we get in and start coding, but those are the two types, absolute and relative. And these are just a couple of examples of document relative paths.